You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. What if I told you that the biggest thing separating men who are respected from men who are ignored has nothing to do with money, looks, or luck, but with how well they can control themselves when no one is watching? What if the reason you feel stuck, reactive, or quietly frustrated isn't because life is unfair, but because your impulses are running the show? Most men never hear this truth. They're taught to chase motivation, to act on emotion, to express everything instantly. But the men who quietly rise above the noise, they do the opposite. They pause, they choose. They don't let anger speak for them. They don't let desire drag them. They don't let comfort decide their future. Self-control isn't weakness. It's not suppression. It's power under command. It's the ability to stay calm when others lose composure, to stay disciplined when distractions beg for attention, to stay focused when the world pulls you in 100 directions. And here's the part most people miss. Every area of your life improves when your self-control improves. Watch this video till the very end, because what you're about to learn isn't theory. It's a mindset shift, a quiet edge, a discipline that, once built, changes how people see you and, more importantly, how you see yourself. Number 1, mastery over impulses, not suppression of desire. Most people misunderstand self-control because they've been taught the wrong definition. They think it means clenching your jaw, white-knuckling through temptation, killing desire at the root. But that's not strength. That's tension. And tension always snaps eventually. Real self-control isn't about pretending you don't want things. It's about standing so firmly in who you are that impulses don't get to drag you around by the collar. You don't become powerful by suppressing desire. You become powerful by mastering it. Desire itself isn't the enemy. Wanting comfort, pleasure, recognition, intimacy, escape, these are natural signals, not moral failures. The problem starts when desire becomes the driver and you become the passenger. When your moods dictate your actions. When urges make decisions before your values even enter the room. That's where most men quietly lose authority over their own lives. Not in dramatic collapses, but in small daily surrenders. One impulse at a time. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Not master of circumstances, not master of others, himself. That's the real battleground, and it's internal, always has been. You don't win it by fighting desire head-on like it's an enemy to be crushed. You win it by understanding it, delaying it, reshaping it, and choosing when, or if, it deserves a response. Think about how often impulses demand immediacy. Now, right now, don't think, just act. That urgency is the giveaway. Anything that can't tolerate a pause is trying to control you. Mastery begins the moment you insert space between the urge and the action. Even a few seconds, even a breath. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That power shows up in the pause. The pause is where you reclaim command. This is where suppression fails and mastery succeeds. Suppression says, "I must not want this." Mastery says, "I see this want clearly and I decide what to do with it." One creates internal friction. The other creates internal alignment. When you suppress, desire doesn't disappear, it goes underground, builds pressure, and waits for a weak moment. When you master, desire loses its grip because it's no longer mysterious or overwhelming. It's just information. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The man who cannot sit with an urge without acting on it is not choosing, he's reacting. Reaction feels like freedom in the moment, but it quietly erodes self-respect. You feel it later, that subtle sense of having betrayed yourself. Over time, those betrayals stack up, and confidence starts leaking out in ways you can't quite explain. Self-control restores that confidence, not by making life dull, but by making your actions deliberate. You don't need to become rigid or joyless to be disciplined. In fact, the opposite is true. When you're no longer owned by impulse, pleasure becomes cleaner, lighter, earned. You enjoy without clinging. You engage without losing yourself. Seneca put it simply, self-control is the chief element in self-respect. Read that again. Self-respect. Not approval, not dominance. Respect for yourself. That's the foundation everything else is built on. So how do you train this in a way that's practical, not theoretical? You start by observing urges without judgment. When an impulse arises, don't label it good or bad, just name it. This is an urge, that's it. That simple naming already weakens its grip because you've shifted from being inside the urge to looking at it. You're no longer fused with it, you're aware. Next, practice delaying, not denying. Tell yourself you can act on the desire later, just not now. 5 minutes, 10, an hour. This isn't procrastination, it's training. Most impulses burn hot and fast. If you can outlast the initial wave, clarity returns. Each time you delay successfully, you reinforce a powerful identity shift. I am someone who decides. That identity compounds faster than motivation ever will. Another exercise is voluntary restraint, not because you have to, but because you choose to. Occasionally say no to something you could easily say yes to. Comfort, convenience, distraction. This isn't punishment. It's rehearsal. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort won't kill you and that desire doesn't automatically outrank your intentions. Over time, this builds quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Also, get familiar with the sensation of wanting without satisfying. Sit with it. Feel it in the body. Notice how it rises, shifts, and eventually fades. Most men never do this, which is why urges feel so intimidating. Once you've watched a desire come and go without acting, you realize something liberating. You are not your impulses. They visit, you remain. The Stoics would remind you that discipline is not deprivation, it's direction. Marcus Aurelius warned against being jerked like a puppet by your impulses. That image is uncomfortable for a reason. You don't want to live pulled by invisible strings. You want to move with intention, with weight, with calm authority. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. Mastery over impulse frees mental energy. When you're not constantly negotiating with yourself, you become more present, more grounded, decisions simplify. Life quiets down internally. That calm shows. People feel it around you even if they can't explain why. Authority doesn't need theatrics. It radiates from self-command. This isn't about perfection. You will slip. Everyone does. The goal isn't to never feel desire or never act impulsively again. The goal is to shorten the gap between awareness and correction, to notice faster, to recover quicker, to recommit without self-loathing. Stoicism isn't harsh, it's practical. It asks, what's within my control right now? And then it acts accordingly. So today, don't try to overhaul your entire life. Just practice the pause, practice naming the urge, practice delaying, practice choosing once where you would normally react. That's enough. Strength grows quietly, repetition by repetition. Because real men aren't defined by how much they want or how little they feel. They're defined by their ability to stand steady inside desire without being owned by it. And once you experience that kind of self-control, not suppression, but mastery, you'll realize it isn't restrictive at all. It's freedom. Number 2, choosing long-term respect over short-term pleasure. Choosing long-term respect over short-term pleasure sounds simple when you hear it, but you already know it's one of the hardest disciplines you'll ever practice. Because pleasure is loud, it's persuasive. It shows up right now and promises relief, excitement, escape. Respect, on the other hand, is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't rush you. It waits to see who you become when no one is forcing you to choose wisely. And this is where self-control stops being a concept and becomes a line in the sand. Every time you face that choice, you are shaping your identity. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way, but in subtle repetitions that harden into character. You don't wake up respected one day. You earn it by repeatedly choosing what strengthens you over what soothes you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Read that again. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you feel like. That's impulse, not power. Real freedom is having the ability to pause, to feel the pull of desire, and still decide for yourself. When you give in to short-term pleasure, you might feel good for a moment, but underneath that comfort is something corrosive. A quiet loss of self-trust. A subtle message to yourself that your urges are in control. Over time, that erodes the way you see yourself. And whether you realize it or not, people sense that erosion. Respect follows discipline, not indulgence. You don't need to fight pleasure as if it's the enemy. That's not the point. The point is choosing who's in charge. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Long-term respect grows from that realization. It grows when you stop outsourcing your decisions to mood, craving, or momentary emotion. When you choose restraint, you're telling yourself, "I'm thinking ahead, I'm building something. I'm not trading my future for a quick hit of comfort." That decision rewires how you carry yourself. It sharpens your presence. It makes your words heavier because you're no longer someone who leaks discipline. Short-term pleasure always asks the same question. Why wait? Long-term respect asks a better one. Who do you want to be? And you feel that difference in your body. One path feels easy but hollow. The other feels demanding but clean. There's a clarity that comes from knowing you didn't take the bait. That clarity builds momentum. It makes the next decision easier, then the next. Over time, restraint becomes less about force and more about identity. You stop saying, "I should resist this," and start saying, "This isn't who I am." Seneca put it plainly, "He who indulges himself shortens his life. He who curbs his desires prolongs it." Not just in years, but in depth, in dignity, in the weight of your presence. When you choose long-term respect, you're choosing to live with fewer internal conflicts. You're no longer constantly negotiating with yourself. You decide once and you stand by it. That's where calm comes from. That's where authority comes from. Not from dominance, not from control over others, but from consistency within yourself. You don't need motivation for this. You need standards. Motivation fades. Standards stay. So here, where you take action. Start by creating a pause. Not a dramatic pause, a simple one. When desire shows up, don't immediately say yes or no. Just pause. Take one breath longer than usual. That breath is where self-control lives. It creates space between impulse and action. Practice that pause until it becomes automatic. This alone will change how you experience temptation. Next, start strengthening your ability to delay. Delayed gratification isn't about denial, it's about timing. Practice choosing later instead of now. Even in small things, you're training your nervous system to tolerate discomfort without panicking. Each time you delay, you reinforce the belief that you can handle unease without collapsing into indulgence. That belief is power. Another exercise is mental rehearsal. Before the moment arrives, decide who you're going to be. Don't wait until desire is screaming. Decide in advance. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, anticipating challenges before they appear. Picture the moment of temptation, then picture yourself choosing restraint. Feel the calm that follows. This conditions your mind to recognize discipline as familiar instead of foreign. You should also audit your inputs. What you consume shapes what you crave, not just physically but mentally. Feed your mind things that reinforce patience, strength, and perspective. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. If your thoughts are scattered, impulsive, and restless, your actions will follow. Guard what enters your attention. Respect grows where attention is disciplined. There will be days you fail, that's not weakness. What matters is how you respond. Do you spiral into guilt and indulgence, or do you reset without drama? Self-control isn't perfection, it's recovery speed. The faster you return to your standards, the stronger you become. Each reset is proof that you're still in the fight. Over time, something shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing constant stimulation. You become comfortable with stillness, with boredom, with silence. And that comfort changes how people perceive you, even if they can't explain why. Respect is attracted to men who don't look desperate for relief, who don't fold under pressure, who can sit with discomfort and remain steady. Choosing long-term respect over short-term pleasure is choosing to become predictable in the best way. Predictable to yourself. Predictable in your values, predictable in your discipline, and that predictability becomes trust. Trust in yourself, trust from others, not because you demand it, but because you've earned it quietly. So today, choose one area where you've been negotiating with yourself. Decide once, set a standard, and then honor it, not loudly, not for approval, just for alignment. Because the man who controls himself doesn't need to prove anything. His restraint speaks for him. Number 3, calm responses in moments designed to provoke you. There's a reason moments of provocation exist. They're not accidents, they're pressure tests. They're designed to see whether you are ruled by impulse or whether you rule yourself. And if you pay close attention, you'll realize that life keeps offering these moments over and over, not to punish you, but to shape you. The man who reacts instantly gives away something precious. The man who stays calm keeps it. That something is control. And control, quietly and consistently, is what defines real strength. You don't need to respond to everything that tries to pull you out of yourself. In fact, most things are hoping you will. Provocation feeds on speed. It wants your reaction now, not later. It wants heat, not clarity. And the moment you give it what it wants, the moment you snap back, explain yourself, defend your ego, or rush to be understood, you've already lost leverage. Marcus Aurelius warned against this when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Calm is not passive. Calm is deliberate restraint. Calm is you choosing not to hand over the steering wheel. When you slow your response, you create space. And in that space, something important happens. You begin to see clearly. You notice the difference between what is being said and what is being aimed at you. You recognize when something is meant to distract, diminish, or destabilize. And instead of reacting from the surface, you respond from depth. Epictetus put it simply, it is not things themselves that disturb us but our judgments about them. The provocation is external. The reaction is optional. You decide whether it enters you or dies at the door. This is where self-control stops being an abstract virtue and becomes a daily discipline. Calm responses are not about suppressing emotion or pretending you don't feel anything. You feel it. You notice it. You just don't let it drive. Think of emotion like a surge of energy. You can let it explode outward, or you can absorb it, redirect it, and use it. The man who masters this doesn't become cold. He becomes unshakable. His silence carries more weight than another man's outburst ever could. There is a quiet authority that emerges when you stop reacting on cue. People sense it even if they can't explain it. Not because you dominate, but because you're not easily moved. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "He who is brave is free." And freedom here doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means not being controlled by whatever pokes at you. When you remain calm in moments designed to provoke you, you reclaim ownership of your inner world. And once you own that, everything else becomes negotiable. You train this skill the same way you train anything that matters, with intention, repetition, and patience. Start by noticing the moment before the reaction. That split second is where the work is done. You don't need to change the emotion, just delay the response. Count your breath. Let the initial wave pass. Ask yourself quietly and honestly, does responding right now serve the man I'm becoming? Most of the time, the answer will be no. And in choosing not to respond immediately, you're not avoiding confrontation, you're choosing the terms. Here's a simple exercise you can practice daily. For the next week, commit to a pause. Anytime you feel that internal pull to react instantly, pause for 3 slow breaths before doing anything. No exceptions. Those breaths are not about calming down, they're about regaining authorship. Over time, that pause becomes automatic, and that pause becomes power. Another exercise is mental rehearsal. Imagine provocation abstractly, pressure, resistance, tension, and picture yourself staying grounded, relaxed, unmoved. The Stoics use this kind of premeditation to strengthen their discipline. You're not rehearsing anger, you're rehearsing composure. There will be moments where staying calm feels like weakness. That's an illusion. Weakness is needing to prove something immediately. Weakness is being unable to tolerate discomfort without lashing out. Strength is restraint. Strength is choosing the long game over the short release. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Calm responses aren't about winning the moment. They're about refusing to become smaller than your standards. As you practice this, something shifts internally. You stop feeling hunted by reactions. You stop feeling dragged into unnecessary battles. Your mind becomes quieter, not because life gets easier, but because you stop feeding chaos with your attention. You start to trust yourself more. And that trust is foundational. A man who trusts his own restraint doesn't fear provocation, he expects it. He sees it as confirmation that he's doing something right. Make this part of your identity, not as a performance but as a principle. Decide that your nervous system is not public property. Decide that not everything deserves your energy. Decide that calm is your default, not because you're indifferent, but because you're intentional. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." If the man you aim to be is composed, grounded, and self-possessed, then your responses must reflect that, especially under pressure. In the end, calm responses in moments designed to provoke you are not about the other person at all. They're about you honoring your own discipline. They're about choosing dignity over impulse, clarity over chaos, and control over noise. Practice it daily. Treat every provocation as a training ground. And remember this: the man who can govern himself never needs to dominate anyone else. Number 4, discipline that stays consistent when motivation fades. There will be days when you feel driven, clear, almost unstoppable. And then there will be days when that fire disappears without warning. No energy, no excitement, no emotional push to do the right thing. This is where most people quietly fall apart. They wait for motivation to return, as if discipline is supposed to feel good, as if consistency is supposed to be fueled by emotion. You already know that's a lie. Real self-control begins exactly where motivation ends. That's the line that separates intention from identity. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a rush of adrenaline or a cinematic soundtrack. It's often boring, repetitive, uncomfortable, and that's why it's so rare. You don't build self-control by doing what excites you. You build it by doing what you said you would do long after the mood that inspired the promise is gone. Marcus Aurelius warned himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength isn't found in feeling ready. It's found in acting anyway. You don't need to feel disciplined to be disciplined. That's one of the most freeing realizations you can have. Feelings are weather. Discipline is structure. Weather changes, structure stays. When you rely on motivation, you hand control over to something unstable. When you rely on discipline, you reclaim authority over yourself. This is what makes self-control such a defining trait. Anyone can act right when it feels easy. Very few can do it when it feels pointless, dull, or uncomfortable. But those few, they become unshakable. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't negotiate with yourself. No internal debates, no drama. No, "I'll do it tomorrow," just action. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "First say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do." Not when it's convenient, not when it feels aligned. Do it because that's who you decided to be. Identity first, emotion second. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. And standards only matter if they hold when motivation fades. Anyone can start strong. The real test is whether you continue quietly, without applause, without excitement, without reassurance. This is where self-respect is forged. Every time you follow through despite resistance, something internal hardens, not in a rigid way, but in a grounded way. You begin to trust yourself, and self-trust is power. The truth is, motivation often shows up after you act, not before. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates motivation. Waiting reverses the order and keeps you stuck. Seneca put it plainly, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The resistance you feel before acting is usually heavier than the act itself. Once you begin, the mind quiets. The noise fades. What remains is movement. Self-control isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being clear. Clear about what matters. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about what you do even when no one is watching. When your discipline stays consistent through emotional droughts, you stop depending on external validation. You stop needing praise. You stop asking for permission. You move because movement is who you are. If you want to train this, start small but non-negotiable. Choose one daily action that requires no motivation and commit to doing it regardless of mood. Not a big gesture, a quiet one. Something so simple that skipping it would feel dishonest rather than difficult. Do it on high-energy days. Do it on low-energy days, especially on low-energy days. That's where the muscle grows. Another exercise: remove choice from the equation. Decide in advance. When the time comes, act immediately without checking how you feel. Count down if you have to. 3, 2, 1, move. The mind learns quickly when it realizes hesitation doesn't change outcomes. You're teaching yourself a new rule: feelings are information, not instructions. You can also practice voluntary discomfort in controlled ways, nothing extreme. Just enough to remind yourself that comfort isn't the priority. Stay a little longer, finish the task cleanly. Sit with the urge to quit without obeying it. Each time you do this, you reclaim a bit more authority over yourself. You become harder to derail. Over time, something shifts. Discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like alignment. You're no longer forcing yourself, you're expressing yourself. You act in accordance with your values, not your impulses. And that's when self-control stops being something you do and becomes something you are. This is what defines real men: not dominance, not noise, not performance, but restraint, consistency, the ability to stand firm when motivation disappears, to move forward without emotional permission, to remain steady while others drift. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily: waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. So be one today, not tomorrow, not when it feels right. Choose discipline that doesn't rely on excitement. Choose standards that don't bend to mood. Choose the quiet path of consistency. Because when motivation fades, and it will, self-control is what remains. And that is where real strength lives. Number 5, emotional control under pressure and criticism. Emotional control under pressure and criticism isn't about being numb. It's not about swallowing everything, pretending nothing affects you, or turning yourself into stone. It's about choosing your response when your instincts are screaming at you to react. It's about the pause. That tiny, powerful space between what happens and what you do next. And that space, whether you realize it or not, is where real strength lives. When pressure tightens around you and criticism hits your ears, you don't rise by pushing back harder. You rise by staying steady. You rise by not letting your emotions hijack your direction. You already know how easy it is to react. Anger flares fast. Defensiveness feels automatic. The urge to explain yourself, to justify, to strike back with words sharper than the ones thrown at you, it all shows up instantly. But every time you give in to that impulse, you hand control to someone else. Marcus Aurelius warned against this centuries ago when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's not poetic fluff. That's a survival manual. When you lose emotional control, you don't just lose composure. You lose leverage. You lose clarity. You lose respect, starting with your own. Think about what pressure really does. It compresses. It exposes. It reveals what you default to when things aren't comfortable. Anyone can appear calm when life is smooth, but pressure strips away the mask. Criticism pokes at your identity. It challenges how you see yourself. And if your sense of worth is fragile, every comment feels like an attack. That's why emotional control starts internally, not externally. If you need approval to feel solid, criticism will always shake you. If your standards come from within, outside noise loses its power. This is where Stoic thinking becomes practical, not philosophical. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Read that again, slowly. No one reaches inside you and pulls your emotions like strings. You cooperate. You agree, you hand them the wheel. Emotional control is the skill of refusing that agreement, not by suppressing emotion but by observing it without obeying it. You notice the heat. You feel the surge, and then you choose restraint anyway. Under pressure, your body wants speed, faster words, faster reactions, faster judgments. Emotional discipline slows you down. It trains you to breathe first, to soften your jaw, to relax your shoulders, to stop talking for a moment. Silence, when chosen intentionally, is not weakness, it's dominance over yourself. Seneca understood this deeply when he wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Delay doesn't mean avoidance, it means wisdom. It means you don't let a temporary feeling dictate a permanent consequence. Criticism is where this gets tested the most. Not praise, not comfort, criticism. Especially when it feels unfair. Especially when it hits close to something you're already insecure about. Your instinct might be to defend, explain, or dismiss, but emotional control asks a different question. Is reacting right now useful? Is it aligned with the man you're trying to become? Most of the time, the answer is no. You don't need to win every exchange. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to prove yourself to people who aren't living by your standards. This is where adopting a long-term mindset changes everything. When you zoom out, you realize that one moment of restraint builds more authority than 100 clever comebacks. When you don't react impulsively, you communicate confidence without saying a word. You signal that you're grounded enough not to be thrown off balance. And balance is intimidating in a good way. Calm unnerves chaos. Stillness exposes emotional immaturity. You don't have to announce your strength, it shows itself. Now, this isn't automatic. You train this daily, intentionally. One simple exercise is practicing the pause. Anytime you feel a spike, annoyance, irritation, defensiveness, count 3 slow breaths before responding, not in your head as a trick but as a discipline. Inhale through your nose. Exhale longer than you inhaled. This resets your nervous system and gives your rational mind time to step in. You're not calming down to be polite. You're calming down to stay in control. Another practice is reframing criticism internally. Instead of hearing criticism as a verdict on who you are, hear it as information. Not all information is useful, but it doesn't need to wound you to be processed. Ask yourself quietly, is there anything here I can use? If yes, take it without emotion. If no, discard it without resentment. Marcus Aurelius advised, if anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. That's not weakness. That's confidence rooted in truth, not ego. You also strengthen emotional control by detaching your identity from outcomes. When pressure mounts, it's often because you're clinging to how things should go. When reality resists, frustration follows. Stoicism teaches acceptance, not passive resignation, but active alignment with what you can control. You control your actions, your effort, your character. You do not control opinions, reactions, or external judgments. Once you internalize this, pressure loses its teeth. You stop fighting reality. And when you stop fighting, you stop reacting emotionally. Another powerful exercise is mental rehearsal. Before stressful situations, even imagined ones, visualize yourself responding with calm. See yourself listening, pausing, speaking slowly or not at all. The mind doesn't distinguish much between rehearsal and reality. You're laying tracks for behavior. So when pressure hits, you're not improvising. You're executing a practiced response. Over time, something shifts. You start to feel the difference between power and impulse. Impulse feels urgent, loud, emotional. Power feels quiet, deliberate, controlled. You no longer need to prove that criticism doesn't affect you because you genuinely aren't ruled by it. You don't suppress emotion, you master it. And mastery always shows. This is what defines real self-control. Not the absence of feeling, but the presence of choice. You feel the pressure, but it doesn't bend you. You hear the criticism, but it doesn't own you. You remain composed not because you're detached from life, but because you're deeply anchored in yourself. That anchor is built one moment of restraint at a time. So start today. Practice the pause, breathe before you speak. Let silence work for you. Accept useful feedback without pride and reject useless noise without anger. Remind yourself again and again that your mind is your domain. Guard it. Discipline it. Strengthen it. Because a man who controls his emotions under pressure doesn't just look strong, he is. Number 6, delayed gratification as a daily practice. Delayed gratification isn't flashy. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. In fact, most of the time it feels like you're losing, like you're walking away from something you could have right now. And that's exactly why it matters. Because every time you choose to wait, to pause, to hold the line instead of indulging the impulse, you're training something deeper than discipline. You're training your identity. You're telling yourself quietly but firmly, I decide. Not my mood, not my cravings, not the noise around me. You already know how tempting it is to reach for the immediate reward, the quick hit, the distraction, the relief, the comfort. It promises ease, but it always charges interest. Delayed gratification flips that equation. It asks you to tolerate a little discomfort now so you can own yourself later. And ownership is the real currency here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Delaying gratification is how that power stops being a quote you admire and becomes a muscle you actually use. Here's the part most people miss. Delayed gratification isn't about denial. It's about direction. You're not saying no for the sake of suffering. You're saying no because there's something bigger you're building. When you give in instantly, you let the moment decide your future. When you wait, even briefly, you put your future back in your own hands. That pause, that space between urge and action, is where real men are made. Epictetus put it bluntly, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom doesn't come from having more options. It comes from not being ruled by the first option that shows up. Start seeing delayed gratification as a daily practice, not a grand gesture. You don't need dramatic vows or extreme rules. You need consistency in small, quiet moments. Moments where no one's watching. Moments where it would be easy to justify giving in. That's where the work is. That's where you build trust with yourself. Every time you delay, even slightly, you reinforce the belief that you can be relied on. And self-respect grows from self-trust, not from motivation. Your mind will resist this at first. It will bargain. It will whisper that this one time doesn't matter, that you've earned it, that you'll be disciplined later. Don't argue with those thoughts. Don't fight them emotionally. Just observe them. Marcus Aurelius advised, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The urge isn't the problem. Your reaction to it is. Let the urge rise. Let it exist. And then let it pass without obeying it. That alone is a victory. A powerful exercise is learning to stretch the gap between desire and action, not forever, just a little longer than you're used to. When the impulse appears, don't suppress it and don't act on it. Sit with it. Breathe. Count slow breaths. Feel the tension without needing to resolve it immediately. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort is survivable, that you don't collapse without instant relief. Over time, this rewires how you respond to temptation. You stop reacting. You start choosing. Another practice is to pre-decide. Don't wait until the moment hits to figure out what you'll do. Decide in advance what kind of man you're becoming and let that guide your actions. Seneca wrote, "He who indulges in empty fears earns himself real fears." The same applies to empty pleasures. When you decide ahead of time what matters more, the moment loses its power over you. You're no longer negotiating with temptation. You're executing a decision you already made. Delayed gratification also sharpens your sense of time. It pulls you out of the tyranny of now and reconnects you to the long game. Most people live at the mercy of the present moment, reacting to whatever feels strongest. You don't have to. You can train yourself to feel the weight of tomorrow in today's choices, not as anxiety, as clarity. Ask yourself quietly, will this make me stronger or weaker, more grounded or more scattered? Then act accordingly. No drama, no self-judgment, just honesty. You'll notice something subtle as you practice this. Your confidence will stop being performative. It won't come from proving anything to anyone. It will come from knowing you can sit with discomfort without folding. That kind of confidence is calm, rooted, unshakable. It doesn't need validation. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." Delayed gratification often feels like that, like you're missing out, like you're behind. You're not. You're ahead in the only way that counts. Make it practical. Choose one daily moment where you intentionally delay, just one. Treat it like training, not punishment. Reflect afterward, not with pride or shame, but with awareness. What did I feel? What did I learn? Did the urge kill me? It never does. Over time, these small wins compound. You stop being impulsive by default. You become deliberate by nature. And remember this, self-control isn't about being rigid. It's about being sovereign. You're not trying to eliminate pleasure from your life. You're refusing to let pleasure dictate your life. There's a difference, a big one. Delayed gratification teaches you that you can want something without needing it immediately, that you can desire without being dominated by desire. That's maturity, that's strength. So practice today, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Practice in the next small choice that asks something of you. Pause, breathe, decide. Every time you do, you step closer to becoming a man who doesn't drift through life reacting, but moves through it with intention. And that, more than anything else, is the power of self-control. Number 7, saying no. When weakness looks tempting, saying no. When weakness looks tempting is one of the quietest forms of power you will ever develop. No applause, no witnesses, no instant reward. Just you standing at a fork in the road, feeling the pull of comfort, escape, indulgence, or delay, and choosing restraint anyway. This is where self-control stops being a concept and becomes a character trait. This is where real strength is forged, not in dramatic moments, but in the ordinary seconds where you decide who is in charge. Your impulses or you. Temptation rarely announces itself as destruction. It arrives dressed as relief. It whispers that you deserve a break, that one slip won't matter, that discipline can wait until tomorrow. And the truth is, it feels convincing. Your body leans toward it. Your mind starts negotiating. This is the moment most people lose, not because they are weak, but because they've never trained themselves to pause. But you're here because you want more than momentary comfort. You want command over yourself. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom begins the instant you stop obeying every urge that knocks. Self-control is not about suppressing desire or pretending temptation doesn't exist. That's fantasy. Desire is human. The Stoics never argued otherwise. What they taught was discernment, the ability to see an urge clearly without being dragged by it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That power shows up when you can feel the craving and still refuse to act on it. When you can sit inside discomfort without needing to escape. When you can say no calmly, without drama, without self-hatred, without bargaining. Understand this, every time you say no to weakness, you are not losing anything. You are reclaiming authority. Weakness always demands immediacy. It wants now. It wants ease. It wants the path of least resistance. Strength, on the other hand, is patient. It plays the long game. It knows that the cost of indulgence is paid later with interest. When you refuse the tempting option, you're casting a vote for the man you're becoming. And over time, those votes compound. One refusal turns into two into a pattern into identity. You don't need to wait until you feel strong to practice this. Strength follows action, not the other way around. The mistake is thinking self-control is something you either have or don't. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it grows through resistance. Each urge you resist is a repetition. Each pause before acting is a set. Seneca put it simply, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." Not because the battle is easy, but because it never ends. There will be moments when saying no feels exhausting, when your mind insists you're missing out, when discipline feels lonely. That's normal. Don't dramatize it. Don't label it as failure or deprivation. Instead, observe it. Say to yourself, "This is just a sensation. It will rise, peak, and pass." You are not the urge. You are the one watching it. That mental distance is everything. The Stoics called this ruling the inner citadel, the place no external force can enter unless you open the gate. Here's a simple practice to sharpen this skill. When temptation appears, don't respond immediately. Count 10 slow breaths, not to distract yourself, but to create space. In that space, ask one question: does this strengthen or weaken my self-respect? Not your image, not your comfort, your self-respect. If the answer leans toward weakness, the decision is already made. Say no quietly, firmly, without argument, then move on. No spiraling, no guilt, no self-congratulation either, just composure. Another exercise: train yourself to delay gratification intentionally. Pick small, harmless urges and practice postponing them. You're not denying forever, just delaying. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. This teaches your nervous system that you are not a slave to immediacy. Over time, urges lose their urgency. They stop feeling like commands and start feeling like suggestions. And suggestions are easy to refuse. You should also rehearse refusal mentally. Visualize temptation arising, not in detail but as a sensation, and imagine yourself declining it calmly. See yourself remaining grounded. See yourself choosing restraint without tension. The mind learns through repetition, even imagined repetition. When the real moment arrives, it feels familiar, controlled, Almost boring, that's mastery. Don't expect this path to make you feel superior. That's ego, and ego is just another weakness in disguise. True self-control makes you quieter inside, less reactive, less desperate. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop chasing stimulation to fill gaps. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to derail. And people sense this even if they can't explain it. Most importantly, remember that saying no to weakness is also saying yes to something deeper. Yes to dignity. Yes to consistency. Yes to becoming dependable to yourself. The world doesn't need louder men. It needs steadier ones. Men who can hold the line when it would be easier to collapse it. Men who don't let fleeting impulses dictate permanent directions. So the next time temptation leans in and tells you this doesn't matter, recognize the lie. It matters precisely because it's small. This is the training ground. This is where control is built. Choose restraint. Choose the harder answer. And do it again tomorrow. Over time, you won't just practice self-control, you'll embody it. And that is the kind of power no one can take from you. Number 8, control over words. Silence over unnecessary reactions. Control over your words is not about becoming quiet for the sake of appearing mysterious. It's about choosing precision over noise. It's about realizing that every sentence you release carries weight, direction, and consequence. Most people speak to discharge tension. You learn to speak to express intention. There's a difference. When you slow your speech, when you let silence do some of the work, you stop leaking energy. You stop negotiating your worth out loud. You begin to feel it settle inside you. And from that place, words stop being a reflex and start becoming a tool. You don't need to comment on everything. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to announce every thought that passes through your mind. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Be silent as to what you are doing and let others interpret it as they will." That line isn't about secrecy. It's about restraint. It's about knowing that your actions, your posture, your consistency will speak far louder than hurried explanations ever could. When you control your words, you regain ownership of your inner world. You stop giving people access to your emotions through careless speech. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness. It's strength that doesn't need witnesses. Most unnecessary reactions come from a need to be seen, validated, or defended. You feel the urge rise to respond instantly, to justify, to snap back. And this is where self-control becomes real. Not in grand gestures, but in these tiny internal moments where you pause, where you breathe, where you decide not to feed the impulse. Epictetus put it simply, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." That's hard. Your ego hates that idea, but your character grows every time you let something pass without grabbing onto it. You are not your first reaction. You are the space between stimulus and response, and in that space you build authority. When you don't react unnecessarily, people feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense it. There's a gravity to someone who isn't easily pulled into emotional noise. Someone who doesn't rush to speak fills the room differently. Their silence feels intentional. Their words, when they finally come, land heavier because they are rare. Think about how much energy is wasted on words that don't move your life forward. Complaints, explanations, emotional outbursts that feel justified in the moment but leave you drained afterward. Self-control asks you to audit that behavior honestly, not with shame, with clarity. Seneca warned, the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. Replace tomorrow with reaction, and the meaning still holds. When you react automatically, you lose the present moment. When you choose restraint, you reclaim it. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. You still feel everything. You just don't let feelings hijack your mouth. You let them pass through you, settle, and then you decide what deserves a response. Over time, this practice changes how you see yourself. You begin to trust your own restraint. You realize you don't need to prove intelligence, dominance, or confidence verbally. It shows up naturally when your words are fewer but sharper. Here's where the habit begins. Start with awareness. For the next few days, notice how often you speak out of impulse, not out loud internally. Notice the urge to interrupt, the urge to defend, the urge to react immediately. You don't have to suppress it, just observe it. That awareness alone weakens the habit. Then introduce a pause, a literal pause. One breath before you speak. One count of silence before responding. That single breath is the difference between reaction and choice. Another practice, limit your words intentionally. Decide that when you speak, you will say only what is necessary, true, and constructive. Nothing extra, no filler, no emotional leakage. You'll be surprised how uncomfortable this feels at first. That discomfort is your ego detoxing. Let it happen. With time, your mind becomes sharper because it knows it won't be allowed to ramble. You can also train silence directly. Choose moments where you normally would react and consciously say nothing. Let the moment pass. Let the discomfort pass. Notice that the world doesn't collapse. Notice that your dignity remains intact. In fact, it grows. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That sentence alone can save you years of unnecessary conflict if you let it sink in. The power of controlled speech is cumulative. Each time you hold back an unnecessary reaction, you reinforce a new identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who is composed, someone who doesn't need to chase the last word, someone who trusts his inner authority. Over time, this bleeds into everything: how you walk, how you listen, how you decide. Silence becomes less awkward and more natural. Words become fewer, but they start carrying truth instead of tension. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. Controlling your words isn't about others, it's about you. When your speech is disciplined, your thoughts become disciplined. When your thoughts are disciplined, your emotions stabilize. When your emotions stabilize, your actions align. This is why self-control defines real strength. Not because it looks impressive, but because it builds internal order. So take this seriously, not aggressively, calmly. Practice silence like a skill. Practice restraint like a muscle. Let your words earn the right to be spoken. And remember this Stoic truth as you move forward. No man is free who is not master of himself. Every time you choose silence over an unnecessary reaction, you step closer to that freedom. Number 9, inner order before outer success. Inner order always comes first, even if the world keeps trying to convince you otherwise. You're told to chase results, status, money, validation. You're told to build outward, to prove yourself through visible wins. But deep down, you already know something feels off when the inside of you is chaotic, when your thoughts are scattered, when impulses run your days, when you're constantly reacting instead of deciding. No amount of external success can stabilize a man who hasn't learned to command himself. And the uncomfortable truth is this: If you don't have order within, whatever you build outside will eventually collapse under its own weight. Self-control is not about restriction for the sake of suffering. It's about alignment. It's about making sure your actions answer to your values instead of your moods. Right now, notice how often you feel pulled in 10 directions at once. One urge says rest, another says escape, another says indulge, another says prove something. Without inner order, you live at the mercy of whatever voice shouts the loudest. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." But ambition without discipline becomes noise. Direction without control becomes exhaustion. Inner order is what turns raw desire into focused force. When your inner world is structured, calm, and intentional, the outer world starts responding differently. Not because you're forcing outcomes, but because you're no longer leaking energy everywhere. You stop negotiating with yourself all day. You stop breaking promises to your own standards. And something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself. That trust becomes confidence, not loud confidence, quiet, grounded certainty, the kind that doesn't need applause. Seneca warned that no man is free who is not master of himself. Read that again. Freedom doesn't start with money or options or recognition. It starts when you can say no to yourself and mean it. You don't need to control everything. You only need to control what's yours to command. Your attention, your reactions, your habits, your standards. This is where most men struggle because controlling the inner world doesn't come with instant rewards. No one claps when you choose restraint. No one sees the moment you pause instead of reacting. No one notices when you hold the line privately. But this is exactly why it matters. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Inner order is deciding who you are before the world tries to decide for you. Think about how much energy you lose to inner conflict, wanting one thing, doing another, knowing better, choosing worse, promising discipline, then surrendering to comfort. Every time that happens, your authority over yourself weakens, not permanently but noticeably. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is coherence. Your thoughts, words, and actions moving in the same direction. When that alignment exists, progress feels lighter. Effort feels cleaner. You're no longer dragging yourself forward, you're walking with yourself. Here's something practical you can start today. Strip your day down to non-negotiables, not a long list, just a few standards you refuse to compromise on. One for the body, one for the mind, one for conduct. Decide them in advance, write them down, and then live as if breaking them costs you something real, because it does. It costs you self-respect. Another exercise, practice voluntary restraint. Choose to delay a harmless desire on purpose, not to punish yourself, but to remind yourself who's in charge. This is ancient Stoic training. Small acts of self-denial strengthen your internal command far more than dramatic gestures ever will. Inner order also means learning to sit with discomfort without running from it. Boredom, frustration, restlessness. These emotions aren't enemies, they're tests. When you can stay present instead of escaping, you build a nervous system that doesn't panic under pressure. Marcus Aurelius advised, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Read that slowly. The power you're looking for has never been external. It's always been internal discipline expressed over time. As inner order grows, outer success stops feeling desperate. You stop chasing outcomes to fill internal gaps. You work because it's right, not because you're afraid of being left behind. You improve because growth is your standard, not because you're trying to prove something. And paradoxically, that's when results begin to compound. Calm focus outperforms frantic effort every time. A man who governs himself doesn't rush. He doesn't beg. He doesn't panic. He proceeds. End each day with one final practice, a quiet review. Ask yourself, where did I act with control today? Where did I surrender it? No judgment, no excuses, just clarity. This was a core Stoic habit, daily self-examination, not to shame yourself, but to sharpen yourself. Improvement begins with honest awareness. Remember this, outer success is loud but fragile. Inner order is quiet but unshakable. Build the inside first. Structure your mind. Discipline your habits. Clarify your standards. The world will respond in time, but even if it doesn't, you'll already have what most men spend their lives chasing. Command over yourself. And that is real power. Number 10, self-command as the foundation of power and respect. Before you click away, take a second and let this sink in. Self-control isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's choosing restraint when your impulses beg for release. It's mastering yourself when no one is watching. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength is available to you right now in every decision you make after this video ends. So when temptation shows up, don't fight it loudly. Don't announce your discipline, just choose better in silence. Control your reactions, control your habits, control what you tolerate. Because the man who can govern himself never needs to dominate others, his presence already speaks. If this message challenged you, sit with it, apply it. And if you're serious about becoming the kind of man who commands respect without demanding it, subscribe and stay with us. More lessons are coming, not to entertain you, but to sharpen you. Until next time, stay disciplined, stay grounded, and remember, the strongest man in the room is always the one who's in control of himself.